In this video, we're going to continue our process in learning how to factor, but this time we're going to be looking and dealing with coefficients in front of the squared term. And in this video, all the coefficients are going to be prime numbers. And I'm going to show you two different ways that you could approach and do these kinds of factoring problems. Let's start with the one on the top left. All right, so I want to factor 7r squared plus 54r plus 35. Now, Option one is to work at trying to come up with a list of possible factors. See, our goal is to figure out how to break this up into two sets of parentheses that multiply together. Now, here's the thing, is I have to figure out how to make 7r squared. Well, to make 7r squared, 7's a prime number. So that means I'm going to have a 7r times a 1r. Now I got to figure out, well, how do I make positive 35 by multiplying together and end up with 54 in the middle? Well, here's the thing. It's through the process of distributing. You're going to have 7r times something, and then whatever else is in this parenthesis times 1r. And so we have to take the 35, and we have to break it up in terms of, all right, what times what makes 35? Well, we have 1 times 35 will make 35, and we have 5 times 7 will make 35. Now, here's the other thing to keep in mind. If everything's positive inside of the parentheses, we're going to have 2 pluses inside of here. Now, I got to figure out, all right, well, 7's got to multiply to something, and then my 1 has to multiply to something else. So 7 times something, and then I have to do plus 1 times some other factor, and that has to wind up giving me 54 in the middle. And so I just guess and check. So let's start with 1 and 35. So if I put 1 here, 35 here, 7 times 1 is 7, 1 times 35 is 35. I add those together, I don't get 54, so that's not my pair. Now I could rearrange it and say, well, what about 7 times 35 plus 1 times 1? That is way bigger than 54, so that combination didn't work. So we're down to our next set of numbers. Well, what about 7 times 5 and 1 times 7? Well, 7 times 5 is 35, 1 times 7 is 7, 35 plus 7 is not 54, so that combination didn't work. Let's try the different orders. Try 7 times 7 and 1 times 5. Well, 7 times 7 is 49. 1 times 5 is 5. 49 plus 5 is 54. So we figured out our pair. So we need to use 7 and 5. Now I need to pay attention to how things were being multiplied. The 7 had to get multiplied by another 7. So I look at how I distribute it here. So that 7 here in red, the 7r, has to multiply to a 7 right over here. So I'm going to put a 7 here. And then we had to have a 1 times a 5, where that 1 is the coefficient of this r. It multiplies to a 5, which has to go right here. And so I have a 5 there. There is a factored form, and that's option 1 in terms of how to approach these kinds of problems. Option 2 is to use that little X method that we used in the previous video to kind of show you how things worked out when we're factoring. Now, when I'm trying to make my X, now here's the thing, I'm still trying to get into this form right here. Now, when I'm making my X here, the number that goes on top is what I should have had, is what times what would make the number on the end. But since I have a number in front here, my number on top is actually going to be 7 times 35 in this case. So I need to write what 7 times 35 is, and 7 times 35 is 245. So 245 is what I want to multiply to be here on the top. Now, the number on the bottom is what I want to add to be. Well, that's still going to be the same number here of 54. All right, so I'm looking at and say, all right, what multiplies together to make 245? That adds together to make 54. Right, so we found this product to be positive 49 and positive 5 that multiply together to be 245 and add together to be 54. So here's the trick, another tricky part about doing this this option here. So I'm going to take those two numbers that I got. Let me zoom in here. All right, so the 49 and the 5. So I have to take the 49 and the 5, and I have to divide it by that 7 that I multiplied to. So I divide both of these by 7. And the other thing that I have to do is I need to change the sign of both of these numbers. So since these were both positive, I need to change their sign and make them negative. And I'm going to set it equal to the variable in my problem, which in this case is r. So I set them both equal to r. Now from here, you're going to simplify your fractions where possible. So negative 49 over negative 7 makes negative 7. So I got negative 7 is equal to r. And then there's nothing really that I can do with in terms of simplifying the negative 5/7. So I'm going to now set the this first one equal to 0. So I'm going to add the 7 over. So I get 0 is equal to r plus 7. Now my fraction over here on the left, actually what we're going to do is we're going to multiply to get rid of the fraction on the bottom. So I'm going to multiply by 7 on both sides. That gives me negative 5 is equal to 7r. And then we're going to add the 5 over, so I get 0 is equal to 7r plus 5. These are my two factors. So I have r plus 7, and we have 7r plus 5. And what you'll notice is, if I zoom back out, notice how that makes the same product that what we had doing the other option. All right, let's look here at this next problem that we want to factor. And so I'm going to do both methods again. Then after this, I'm just going to stick with one method from here on out. And so I want to figure out what the two parentheses are going to be that would multiply together to create that 5b squared minus 41b plus 42. Well, I'm looking, I start with my front number. Well, 5b squared, that's 5 is a prime number. So that kind of narrows my hunt down a little bit because the only way to make 5 is multiply 5 times 1. And so I know I'm going to have a 5b and a b in front. Now, if you have a minus in the middle and a plus on the end, that means both of your signs inside of here have to be minus. Because the only way to add together to be a negative number and multiply together to be a positive is if you're dealing with two negative numbers. So I know I have that to start with, and I'm going to do that first option where we kind of just guessed and checked. So that option 1 where we use the factors. Now if I'm kind of looking at this in terms of, all right, I had to, if I'm distributing this out, that 5b is multiplying to something. And then my 1b is multiplying to something else. And so what I am trying to figure out is, all right, 5 times what number plus 1 times what other number equals negative 41 here in the middle. Well, to figure out what my possibilities are to go inside of parentheses, I'm looking at 42 and trying to figure out, well, what are the numbers that multiply together to make 42? You got 1 times 42, and we have 2 and 21. We have 3 and 14, and we have 6 and 7. Now, remember, both of these numbers here are going to be negative on the inside. And because two negatives multiply together to make positive. And so I'm just plugging in here my factors to see how I can make negative 41. Well, 1 and 42, if I put 1 in, 5 times negative 1 is negative 5. 1 times negative 40, or times negative 42 is negative 42. They do not add together to make negative 41. Neither, it wouldn't work if I rearranged them. So those would not work. If I use 2 and 21, 5 times 2 is 10, 20, and then 10 and 21 make 31. If I rearrange that, that wouldn't work either. So they don't work. If I use 3 and 14, 5 times negative 3 is negative 15. Negative 15 plus 14, negative 14 is not negative 41. If I rearrange them, 5 times negative 14 is going to already be way larger than negative 41, so that doesn't work. Now we're here at 6 and 7. If I do, let's see, 5 times negative 6 would be negative 30. 1 times negative 7 would be negative 7. That would add together be negative 37. That doesn't work. We can try the other way. 5 times negative 7, 1 times negative 6. That gives me negative 41. So I found my pairs of numbers that would add together to make what it was I was looking for. Well, that 5 had to multiply to a negative 7. So if I'm looking at my distributed form, that means the negative 7 has to go here. And I already have the negative part because I have the minus. The 1 had to multiply to the negative 6. Well, that 1 is the coefficient of the b, so that means I got to have negative 6 right here. And so there's our factored form. All right, option 2 is to use that x method. And so the x method that we have is I make the x, the number on top is what you got to multiply to b, but because I have a number in front that's 5, my product is 5 times 42 for this x method. So 5 times 42 is 210. Now I still want to add together to make that number in the middle, which in this case is negative 41. So I'm trying to figure out what times what is 210 that adds together to make negative 41. And we wind up getting your product there. That's the hardest part, is to figure out what these two numbers are going to be. And we wind up having negative 35 times negative 6. So negative 35 and negative 6 will add together to make negative 41. They'll multiply together to make positive 210. And so what we do from here is I need to take the fact, those aren't my answers. All right, so I have to take the negative 35 and I have to divide it by that positive 5. And I got to do the same thing with the negative 6. All right, so from here what you do is you take those two numbers that you found. And so we had negative 35 and we had negative 6, and we have to do some things here that are a little tricky with this method. Well, first, we have to divide by that 5 on both of them. The second thing that you do is I need to change the signs right here. So if they're negative, they become positive. And I'm going to set it equal to my variable, which in this case is b. Now, from here, what you're going to do is you're going to simplify. So 35 over 5 makes 7. So I got 7 is equal to b. Then I'm going to subtract that 7 over, and so I get b minus 7. And then I'm going to do the same thing here for the 6 over 5, except the difference is I'm just going to multiply by that denominator, and that's going to give me 6 is equal to 5 times b, and then I'm going to minus that 6, and I get 0 is equal to 5b minus 6. And what we have here are our factors. So we have b minus 7 times 5b minus 6. And then if you notice that, that's the same answer that we just got. All right, next one. We have 2a squared minus 15a minus 27. I want to write it in factored form. And so if I pre-make my factors, we'll do the x method and the just a normal guess and check method here. Is the number in front of the a squared is prime, so that means that I know I have to have a 2a and just a regular old a. Now, I have a negative in the middle and a negative on the end, so my signs here are going to be opposites of one another, and I don't really know what they are at this stage. But what I do know is that I'm going to have 2 times something, and then plus 1 in front of that other a times something else, so they're going to have to add together to give me that negative 15. And so I'm trying to figure out what those numbers are, because the 2a is going to multiply to whatever's in that second binomial, and the 1a is going to multiply to whatever's in that first binomial. Those numbers that I'm picking from have to be the factors of, in this case, negative 27. Which I look at this in terms of maybe just looking at it from a 27 standpoint. I have 1 and 27, and then we have 3 times 9. And so that's really all we have to work with, and I'm trying to figure out, well, which pair will make negative 15 in the middle. And that pair is going to be the 3 and 9 pair. Now, I have to figure out, well, which one of those numbers is going to be negative and which one of those is going to be positive. Well, 2 times negative 9, and then 1 times positive 3. Negative 9 times positive 3 makes negative 27, and then it's negative 18 plus 3 make negative 15. And so I put those numbers where they go. So the 2 has to multiply to the negative 9, which means negative 9 goes in the second set of parentheses. Positive 1's got to multiply to the positive 3, and so there's our factored form. All right, option 2 is to use that x method. All right, so the x method here, we got a couple of tricky parts that you got to remember that if you're doing that, is the number on top is what you got to multiply to. Well, my product is going to be the product of the first and the last number. So 2 times negative 27, which is going to be negative 54. So I need to multiply together to make negative 54. And I need to add to make our number in the middle of negative 15 right here. And so I'm trying to find my numbers based on that information to figure out what it is we're going to have. And so those numbers are going to wind up being negative 18 and positive 3. Negative 18 and positive 3 multiply to be negative 54. They add up together to be negative 15. So we have to do some adjustments that are commonly forgotten when doing this X method. Is that if you have the coefficient, in this case a 2, that I multiplied by to that negative 27, I need to adjust both of these numbers by that. So I'm going to take my negative 18 and my positive 3, and I need to divide both of them by a 2. Now the second thing that you have to do is you got to change the sign. So if I had negative 18, I got to make it positive. And if I had a positive 3, I got to make it a negative. And I'm going to set it equal to the variable that I have in my problem, in this case of a. From here, simplify your fraction. 18 divided by 2 makes 9. And then I can't really simplify the negative 3 over 2, so we're going to make both of those expressions set equal to 0. So if I minus 9 to the side with the a, I got a minus 9. And then if I take this fraction on the right, I need to times both sides by 2. So I get rid of the fraction. I have negative 3 is equal to 2a. And then add the 3 to the other side, and I got 0 is equal to 2a plus 3. Now from here, we're going to take these two expressions of a, and those are our factors. And so if I write this in factored form, I'd have a minus 9 times 2a plus 3, and you'll notice that those two factors are the same factors we got doing option 1. All right, one more problem here. So I want to factor 3m squared plus 10m minus 8. Now we're looking, we have a prime number in front here of 3 in front of that m squared, so that means I have to have a 3m and a 1m multiplied out. I need to figure out what the other numbers are. Well, if I have opposite signs here, I'm going to have opposite signs inside of my factors. I just don't know which one's minus, which one's plus. If I was to multiply this out, that 3m is going to multiply to some number here in the second set of parentheses, and that 1m is going to multiply to the other number in the first parenthesis. Those numbers are the factors of 8. So I need to figure out 3 times what factor of 8 plus 1 times what factor of 8 is going to wind up making a positive 10 in the middle. So we're going to take 8 and we're going to break it up into its factors. Well, 8 is 1 times 8. And it's 2 times 4, and I figure out what pair of numbers would make that. So I'm going to say, looking at the problem, it's going to be 2 and 4. Now, here's the thing, is I need to be negative 8, and so I got to be careful with that. So one of these numbers is going to have to be negative. So since I need to add together to be positive 10, we would have to have 3 times positive 4 and 1 times negative 2, because 12 minus 2 makes positive 10. Now, looking at what we have, the 3 has to multiply to the 4, so that means the positive 4 goes in the second set of parentheses. And the 1 has to multiply to the negative 2, so that means minus 2 goes into this first set of parentheses. There's our factored form. All right, option 2 is to use that X method. And so the X method here, I'm going to make my X, and on the top is my product. So I'd have to, since I have a number in front of the m squared, my product is going to be 3 times negative 8, which gives me negative 24. And they have to add together to be this number in the middle still of positive 10. And so I'm looking to figure out, all right, what multiplies to be negative 24 that adds together to be positive 10? That's going to be 12 times negative 2. Now that I figured these numbers out, I have to do my adjustments here. So these two numbers, 12 and negative 2, are going to have to get divided by that 3. And so I'd have 12 over 3, and we have the negative 2 over 3. Now the second part that we have to remember is you got to change the sign so that 12 becomes negative and that 2 becomes positive. and we're going to set it equal to the letter that's in our problem. So I'm going to set it equal to m, and then we simplify our fractions where we can. 12 over negative 3 makes negative 4, or negative 12 over 3 makes negative 4, and then we're going to move that 4 over, and we get 0 is equal to m plus 4. And then if we have a fraction, we multiply by the denominator, and that's going to give me 2 is equal to 3m, and then we're going to subtract that 2 to the other side. That gives me 0 is equal to 3m minus 2. And what you have here are the numbers that go inside of your parentheses, or the factors, and we have m plus 4 times 3m minus 2. And that's the same as what we got doing guess and check method. Remember, the order is a little different, but multiplication is commutative, so the order of the factors don't matter.